The night Luna escaped from prison was the night Los Angeles stopped pretending that it was ever in control. What began as a whisper in the corridors of the correctional facility turned into a storm that swept across the coast, dragging everyone into its wake. It started with something deceptively small, a routine laundry delivery, a moment of distraction, a guard looking away for 3 seconds too long. By the time the alarm went off, the cell was empty, the security cameras looped into silence, and Luna was already inside the cart that rolled quietly through the gates toward the outer loading zone. It was a trick so simple, so old-fashioned, that it almost mocked the technology surrounding her. The irony was brutal. The most dangerous woman in the city escaped not through force or weapons, but through audacity and patience. By dawn, the news had spread like wildfire. Inmate escapes custody. The headline read, but to those who knew the truth, it was much more than that. To Bill Spencer, it was unfinished business returning to haunt him. To Lee and Poppy, it was a reckoning they'd hoped to avoid. To Will and Electra, it was a nightmare made flesh, a ghost from the past whose name carried the weight of guilt and fear. And to Sheila Carter, it was entertainment, a chaos she could sit back and savor, watching as the people who once condemned her now found themselves in the same moral swamp she had always lived in. The city went into lockdown. Patrol cars flooded the streets. Helicopters circled the coastline. But Luna was already moving with a clarity that bordered on supernatural instinct. Every step she took seemed to follow an invisible map, one drawn by memory, pain, and vengeance. The prison walls had never broken her. They had only taught her patience. For months, she had listened to guards talk, memorized schedules, studied the rhythm of the outside world through faint radio broadcasts. She had waited, biding her time, knowing that the perfect opportunity would arrive not when she forced it, but when her enemies felt most at peace. And so it was almost poetic that her escape coincided with the quiet morning routine at Will and Electra's beach house. The ocean stretched out before them, calm and deceptively blue, its horizon lined with the same kind of serenity that comes before a storm. Will stood on the deck with a cup of coffee, scanning the waterline. He had been restless ever since Luna's trial, haunted by the way her eyes had met his across the courtroom, not with anger, but with something deeper, something that looked disturbingly like forgiveness. He had been the one to testify against her, to provide the final detail that sealed her fate. And though everyone told him he had done the right thing, a part of him had never believed it. Because in that moment, when she looked at him, he saw not a criminal, but a mirror, someone shaped by desperation, by choices that spiraled too far to undo. Electra joined him, her hair catching the morning light, her expression uneasy. She tried to act normal, but the tension between them was like a fault line waiting to rupture. She too had her connection to Luna, though she rarely spoke of it. It wasn't guilt in her case, it was fear. Fear of the way Luna's memory refused to fade, fear of the dreams where Luna stood at the edge of her bed whispering, "You took everything from me." Fear that no matter how many times she told herself it was over, the past was still alive and watching. When the police sirens started echoing from the highway above, Will knew it was her. The timing was too perfect, the dread too specific. He called the police chief he knew personally, his voice tight. Within minutes, the coastline was crawling with patrol cars. Officers swept the dunes, scanning for movement. Helicopters combed the cliffside, their rotors whipping up waves that crashed violently against the rocks. And then came the call from a patrol unit positioned near the southern ridge. They had spotted a woman moving along the edge of the cliffs, barefoot, bleeding, wearing what looked like the tattered remains of a prison uniform. It was Luna. The chase that followed was chaos distilled into motion. Luna ran with the raw grace of an animal cornered, her breath ragged, her feet slicing open on sharp stones. Behind her, the sound of boots and shouts blurred into a single pulse. Ahead, the cliff narrowed into a jagged outcropping that dropped straight into the sea. Every instinct told her to stop, but she couldn't.
Not now.
Not when freedom was close enough to taste. Not when the world that betrayed her was within reach. Poppy was the first to catch up, her voice breaking through the wind. She didn't shout commands, she pleaded. Her sister's name left her lips like a prayer, but Luna didn't look back. There was no room for tenderness here, only survival. Lee arrived moments later, her composure cracking for the first time in years. She wasn't a doctor or a sister anymore. She was a witness to tragedy about to repeat itself. And then, from behind the line of police cars, another figure emerged, Sheila Carter, of all people, standing at the edge of the chaos with a smirk that could slice glass. She didn't move to intervene. She simply watched. For someone like Sheila, the spectacle of another soul unraveling was nourishment. Will pushed past the officers, ignoring their warnings. He couldn't stay back. This was his fault. At least that's what his mind kept whispering. He had betrayed her, exposed her, condemned her. He had destroyed someone who, for all her flaws, had once trusted him. The guilt had gnawed at him like acid, and now, watching her stumble along the cliffside, it became unbearable. He called out her name, his voice echoing against the roar of the ocean. Luna stopped for a second, just 1 second, and turned her head. Their eyes met across the distance, and in that moment, the entire world seemed to pause. She looked nothing like the woman he remembered. Her face was thinner, her hair wild, her expression unreadable. But her eyes, those same eyes, still held that terrifying mixture of clarity and grief. It wasn't hatred she gave him. It was recognition. She mouthed something he couldn't hear, a word swallowed by the wind. And then, as the police closed in, her foot slipped. Time shattered. The sound of the rocks giving way was deafening, followed by the collective gasp of everyone watching. Will lunged forward, but it was too late. Luna's body tumbled backward, disappearing into the mist below. The waves rose to meet her, swallowing her whole. And then, silence. Only the endless rhythm of the ocean remained. Officers scrambled to organize a rescue. Helicopters descended lower, floodlights cutting through the fog. Divers were called. The entire coastline turned into a theater of urgency. But as the hours passed, the truth settled like dust. No body was found. The sea gave nothing back. The official report called it an accidental death. The suspect fell during pursuit, the papers wrote, and is presumed deceased. But for those who stood at that cliff, the word presumed carried too much weight. Will couldn't accept it. He stood for hours, staring at the water until the tide reached his shoes. Electra begged him to leave, but he couldn't. He said nothing, just kept looking, as though by sheer force of will he could summon her back. In the days that followed, Los Angeles became a city haunted by its own conscience. The investigation dragged on, but no trace of Luna appeared. Not a fragment of fabric, not a bone, not a heartbeat. Rumors began to bloom like weeds. Some said she had drowned instantly. Others swore she had planned it, that the fall was part of her escape, that she had vanished into the caves beneath the cliffs and was waiting for her chance to reemerge. The tabloids called her the Phantom of Pacific View. Talk shows debated whether she was dead or alive, a victim or a villain. For Will, the noise didn't matter. He carried her ghost everywhere. At night, he heard the sound of her fall, the sharp gasp, the crash of waves, the silence after. He dreamed of her standing at the edge of his bed, her clothes still wet, her eyes hollow. In those dreams, she didn't speak. She just stared at him, as if waiting for him to confess. Each morning, he woke drenched in sweat, his heart pounding with the weight of unspoken guilt. He stopped going to work, stopped answering calls. Even Electra's gentle touch began to feel like a reminder of something he had broken. Electra tried to be the strong one. She told herself that Luna was gone, that justice had been served, that they could finally move on. But the human mind doesn't let go so easily. Small things began to unnerve her. The sound of the wind rattling the shutters, the sight of footprints in the sand near the deck, the faint smell of salt water that lingered longer than it should. One night, she found a single wet handprint on the glass door, just at the height where someone might have pressed their palm to see inside. She convinced herself it was condensation. But deep down, she didn't believe it. The police conducted follow-up searches. They found nothing, but Lee remained unconvinced. She visited the cliffs almost every evening, standing with her hands clasped, staring into the horizon as if the ocean might answer her. Poppy joined her once, but neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Sisters share silences that words can't reach. Both carried the same private torment, one of blood and betrayal, one of guilt for surviving what Luna could not. Sheila, of course, treated the entire affair like a cosmic joke. She appeared on talk shows, offering her expert insight on the psychology of vengeance, feeding the media the myth of Luna as if she were narrating a ghost story. People like her, Sheila said with a glint in her eye, don't just die. They linger. They wait for the right moment to remind you that they're still part of the game. Her words echoed through the tabloids, fueling speculation that Luna's body had never been meant to be found. As months passed, the world moved on or pretended to. Will and Electra tried to rebuild their lives, throwing themselves into work, charity events, anything that would distract them from the shadow that clung to their home. But the beach house never felt the same. The laughter that once filled its rooms became quieter. The air itself seemed heavier. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, Electra would wake to the sound of dripping water, steady, deliberate, as though someone were walking through the house, leaving a trail behind. When she turned on the lights, nothing was there. Yet the smell of the sea always lingered for hours afterward. Will grew increasingly withdrawn. He stopped sleeping in their shared room, preferring the couch where he could watch the ocean through the glass walls. He told Electra he found it calming, but in truth, he couldn't stop watching the waves. He kept expecting to see something, a figure in white, a reflection that didn't belong, a sign that the ocean had given back what it had taken. He began keeping a light on the deck at all times, just in case. The guilt was relentless. He replayed the chase over and over, searching for the exact moment when he could have saved her. If he hadn't shouted her name, would she have turned? If he had reached her in time, could he have pulled her back? It didn't matter that everyone, including the police, told him it wasn't his fault. Guilt doesn't obey logic. It carves its own rules, and Will lived by them now. Electra, meanwhile, felt herself unraveling in quieter ways. She started seeing Luna everywhere, in reflections, in crowds, in the edges of her dreams. Sometimes, she swore she could hear Luna humming, that same soft tune she used to play on the piano years ago, drifting faintly through the walls. Once, she found the piano lid open, though she was sure she'd closed it the night before. Another time, she discovered her favorite necklace lying on the sand outside the door, its chain twisted, as if someone had been holding it. She didn't tell Will. She didn't want to add to his torment. But inside, she began to wonder if the line between fear and madness had already blurred beyond recognition. The city never stopped talking about Luna. Every few weeks, a new sighting would emerge, a woman in a white dress seen near Malibu, a figure matching her description boarding a bus at midnight, a shadow caught on security footage near the cliffs. None were confirmed, but each story kept the legend alive. The narrative evolved. Luna wasn't dead. She was waiting. Waiting to return, to reclaim what was hers, to finish what she started. The myth became more powerful than the woman herself. For Will, every rumor was a blade. He tried to ignore them, but part of him wanted to believe. Because if Luna was alive, then maybe he could make it right. Maybe he could apologize. Maybe he could finally be free of the crushing weight of her fall. He started writing letters to her. Not to send, just to write. Apologies, explanations, confessions. He hid them in a drawer in his study. But one morning, he found the drawer empty. Electra swore she hadn't touched them. The staff hadn't either. Yet the next day, a single page appeared on the porch. One of the letters, soaked and crumpled, the ink blurred but still legible. Across the bottom, written in a shaky hand, was a single word, soon. After that, nothing felt safe. Electra insisted they move. Will refused. If she's alive, he said quietly, she'll come back here. This is where it ends. It wasn't bravado, it was resignation. He didn't fear Luna anymore. He feared living without closure. The following months turned the beach house into a mausoleum of memory. The walls held whispers, the ocean sang with regret. And through it all, the question remained, had Luna truly died, or had she become something more terrifying, a presence without a body, a haunting without a grave? When the anniversary of her disappearance arrived, Will went to the cliffs alone. The air was thick with mist, the kind that clings to skin like breath. He stood at the edge, staring down into the dark water. For a moment, he thought he saw movement, a flicker of white far below, like fabric caught in the current. He leaned close.